Hey guys, this is Stuart Stevens. Welcome to Lunch with Lincoln. Um, this is a really special thing for me. Get to talk to my old nemesis and pal Joe Trippi, who's this, I think it's fair to say, legendary political operative, Democratic operative, who made our life, those of us working on the Republican side, miserable for some decades. Um, it's it's an extraordinary pleasure and honor and fun and meaningful to get to work with Joe. So, Joe, welcome to Lunch with Lincoln, and welcome to the Lincoln Project, bro.
It's great being with you, Stuart, and the feeling's mutual. Been through a lot of tough fights on opposite sides against each other, but happy to be in the trench with you and the others at the Lincoln Project as we, take on this threat that's out there against our democracy right now. Really important fight.
Joe and I kind of knew of each other the way you do, and I always had tremendous respect for him. But a few years ago, when was it, 2013 or 14, Joe?
Something like that, yeah.
We well, theoretically taught a course together at the University of Chicago Institute of Politics. It mostly meant that I sat there and listened to Joe and nodded and asked him questions. So I'm going to kind of do that again today. Joe, look, let me just start with the basics here and tell me why it is that you wanted to join the Lincoln Project.
Look, I again, as we talked about, we've been, against each other, had some tough battles, but those were always over pretty important, I thought at the time, and I think you did too, policy differences about the direction of the country and a democracy we both loved and that most people in politics were striving to make better, even though we disagreed about it. I don't think that's the fight we're in. In fact, it was a few months ago talking to you and Steve and Rick that I started to understand, rethink this. And this is not a fight between Republicans and Democrats. It's not a fight left or right. This is an autocratic, authoritarian movement that's literally taken over what used to be the Republican Party. And it's all of us now. It's got to be all of us joining together. We may still have differences on policy, but we both, and I hope all Americans want to remain a democracy and are willing to fight for it. And it's going to take all of us working together in a broad pro-democracy coalition to defeat this thing. It's not, January 6th wasn't the end of this. And we all, I think a lot of us know that and understand it. But I also think a lot of the country is suffering under the delusion that, hey, we're getting back to normal,
right?
Two parties. And I wanted to do something that said, no, it's not. And we've got to come together and we've got to make a difference together. And I thought the best way I could do that, aside from, fighting an individual race here and there in 2022 was to join with the Lincoln Project and help build that pro-democracy coalition, help bring more Democrats, more independents, Republicans together, even if it's different groups. I mean, that's a broad coalition that's doing different things, getting out the vote, trying to sound the alarm on the authoritarian movement that's growing out there, and also those that are trying to find some common ground and get some things done for the country right now in the midst of this, this polarized fight that you can't negotiate. You can't negotiate with a lot of these people. So I think there are a lot of different organizations out there. We need to pull them all into a pro-democracy coalition, make everybody understand what the stakes really are, fight on that ground. If this is democracy versus autocracy, I think the majority of the American people will get out there, get active, and vote and stop it. I think if this is the same, falling into the trap of and the press does this, both sidism and Republicans covering everything as partisan, like the insurrection on the 6th is not some partisan thing here. We need to get to those facts. I hope the press gets that, but I think that's another thing that we all have to work on. Yeah,
I mean, as someone who, in the other part of my life, I write a lot, I have tremendous sympathy for the press, because how do you cover something that's never happened before in America, where a major party embraces autocracy? I think this whole moment is sort of like a pandemic, that what we say at the beginning sounds alarmist and maybe a bit crazy, but in the end, it always is going to end up sounding ridiculously inadequate.
No,
I
think that's
right. Sure. A lot of people were wrong in 2016 about Donald Trump, but it's really, really hard to find anybody who was more wrong than me. I didn't think the guy was going to win the nomination. I famously said I didn't think he'd win a primary. I kind of said that to be provocative, but it was also wishful thinking. And once he got the nomination, I didn't think he'd win the general election. And when all that happened, I really struggled with, how is it that I didn't see this coming? And that led me to write this book, It Was All a Lie, How the Republican Party Became Donald Trump, and sort of tried to trace what happened to the party. But I'm really curious, and I've never asked you this. As someone on the Democratic side watching the Republican Party, what do you think happened? How did we get here?
Well, I think back in, I can't remember when they did it, but I think it was Politico did a thing where they asked everybody how long Trump would be around. I think it was like July of 2015, or right after he had got around. And I said, as long as he wants. I said that he's going to take over the Republican Party, that he will, and he will never walk away. I mean, they will never be able to get rid of him, because his vengefulness and all that, those things would take over. I do admit I didn't think he would actually go all. I thought he was doing a stunt,
right,
to drive the.
I think probably he did too.
Yeah, and so I don't think I said, hey, he's going to win or he's going to absolutely run for president, but I did say if he goes, and they embrace him, they will never get rid of him. And I'm sorry I was right about that. That's the one thing. I was wrong about a lot of things, but that one, it turns out I was right about. But, getting back to that, what you were talking about with the press, it's also true of corporate America. I mean, I think corporate America has been, working, for decades and decades with these two parties. You give to both sides. You give to this ranking member on one committee and the chairman and others on that committee. You stick your lobbyists in there, and you try to get through with getting your way on some of these issues. They play both sides, and I think they lack the same understanding. I mean, giving them the benefit of the doubt, which sometimes you got to be a little crazy to do, but they don't realize you can't, we're not in that time anymore. This is an authoritarian movement. If you contribute to them and its members, particularly any of the 147, you are financing an authoritarian movement. This isn't playing. There's no both sides of this. It's a zero-sum game. Autocracy wins, democracy dies, and anybody who doesn't understand what happens if you're in the C-suite of corporate America, or if you're a journalist and don't, what happens in an autocracy is there is no press, or it's state press. So, and that's part of the other problem. So too many Americans can't. Like you said, sounds a little crazy, but because this is America, and January 6th can never happen in America. Well, it did, and we still lack an imagination, I think, of just how far this authoritarian movement, how big it's growing, and how far it's willing to go. There was a poll that came out today. 47% of Republicans say that they will may have to resort to violence to take the country. I can't remember the exact phrasing, but it was, it was 47%, which is bigger than I've seen it in the past. So it's growing.
I think the only moment would be 1860, where the very notion of democracy itself is in question. And, we've had fascist movements in America before, big fascist movements in the 30s, but we never became fascist. And I think a lot of that was probably because Roosevelt was president and not Lindbergh or Henry Ford.
Yeah.
We would have been the same country. And I think what I find just so depressing as someone who worked for decades in the Republican Party, that the Republican Party, let's call it establishment, and I've never really understood what that is, but let's call it establishment, didn't stand up to Trump. I think that moment when Trump called for a Muslim ban in December of 2015 was the moment that they could stand up.
Yeah.
And, I know what happened tactically, call it, or strategically with those other candidates running against Trump in 2016. They couldn't imagine Trump winning the Republican nomination. I mean, a guy who's a failed casino owner who talks in public about having sex with his daughter was not going to be the Republican nominee. That was obvious. So all you had to do was get one-on-one with this guy and you were going to beat him. So, they spent most of their time in a murder-suicide pact attacking each other to end up with Trump.
Yeah.
And I think that failure of lack of imagination is like you're saying, one of our greatest enemies now. And usually when democracies slide into autocracy, it's because those who are on the Democratic side can never imagine it happen. And that.
No, that's exactly right. It's because the authoritarian movement exhausts people. I mean, it just keeps coming. People get exhausted. They don't see it coming, or those that do see it coming get exhausted by trying to stop it when no one else is seeing it coming. Put those two factors together, and that's why I think we got to wake up corporate America, wake up the press corps to what this fight really is about, and a lot of the American people to what this fight really is about. Hopefully, the January 6th, the Select Committee. I think clearly the first day with those 4 officers was pretty stark, and I don't know how you could, although we know Fox and others aren't covering it so much, but I think it's still on the right track today to maybe start that process of getting people to understand what this is really about and what the stakes really are. I do have an idea about what they should do next. I mean, I was thinking about it, and I think the perfect bridge from those 4 officers' testimony would be if it were me and I could, could call the next witness. I think it would be Mitt Romney. Mm-hmm. Look, he's nominee of the party for president. One of their sitting senators from Utah. And I would only ask him about, not get, real, it's not a negative thing. It's just asking him about those moments when that police officer, Mitt Romney's going the wrong way towards the mob. Officer Eugene Goodman stops him, runs to him, turns him around, and Mitt Romney starts running away from that mob and going in the right direction to safety. And it's the perfect bridge to from those officers to here's an officer saving Mitt Romney from harm's way. And I think I would like to hope that Mitt Romney wouldn't demand a subpoena to testify to all that. And I think if they did that, it should again demonstrates the bipartisanship of the kind of hearings they're holding. If Mitt would participate, and in terms of without a subpoena, and then it also then puts, I think, the Jim Jordans and others, McCarthy, Brooks, in a situation where, well, Mitt Romney came. He testified. We were all looking for facts here, and why are you requiring a subpoena? I mean, it starts to show sort of a divide out there. I don't know if it would work, but it's the kind of thing I think we need to all keep doing to separate and define what this is about, and so that people can see it. There are people like Mitt Romney and Kinzinger and Cheney And I think we need to embrace them as well to the extent we can, or at least have them voice what the difference really is here.
Yeah, I worked with both of those. In 2000, when Secretary Cheney then was picked by George Bush to be his vice president, I was thrown into debate prep. Didn't know the Cheney world at all. And Liz Cheney ran that debate prep. And let me tell you, man, I mean, she did an unbelievable job. There were a lot of people around Dick Cheney, not shockingly, who really thought a lot of themselves.
Yeah.
Many of them for justifiable reasons, but they didn't lack for big egos in that room. And she handled it with a firmness and a deftness that was just so impressive. There was never any question who was in charge. And I wrote a book about the Bush campaign in 2000, after 2000, called The Big Enchilada. And I predicted in that book that Liz Cheney would run for president one day. And I was kind of being hyperbolic, but kind of not. And I worked for Mitt Romney, and just think where the country would be and where the party would be if others in the party had shown the courage that those two had shown. I mean, none of this would be happening if they had impeached Trump the first time.
Yeah.
And certainly voting not to convict him in the Senate, I think is going to go down as a moment akin to the Munich Accord that Chamberlain signed with Hitler. The difference is Neville Chamberlain was a really honorable man who erred historically, but I think with good intentions, still traumatized as the whole country was by the slaughter of World War I. He had admirable goals. Whereas I think with McConnell, it's just sheer lust for power.
Absolutely.
I mean, McConnell doesn't vote to convict him and then goes out and gives this extraordinary speech, which says why he should have. I mean, you couldn't write that in like a Saturday Night Live sketch without people like rolling on the floor laughing. I'd like to say that the party I worked in, that's the future. But if you held a gun to my head and said, do you think it's more likely to be Liz Cheney or Marjorie Taylor Greene? I wouldn't say Liz Cheney. I just don't see any reason to believe it. And, if you go back to the post-election, if only Republican senators particularly, and members of Congress, had admitted what was obvious, that Donald Trump had lost, none of this, I think, would have gotten air.
No, and like Trump said after the first impeachment, I think recently it may have been one of the books saying that I only got worse. It didn't like slow me down. I only got worse. And that's what I think we're seeing in this movement too. The more they instill that fear, the political fear, those that are worried about their careers, et cetera, so they're not willing to take the stand. The more that works for them, the more emboldened they get. And the more they go on the attack. Now it's, trying to remove, make sure Kinzinger doesn't return, it's the new, it's a complete purge of anybody who disagrees with them. And, there's a question in the chat from A. Frazier on YouTube. Hey, Trippi, as Democrats, shouldn't we have seen this emerging prior to Donald J. Trump? Yeah, but I mean, we all should have. Because one of the things that's happened that made this all possible, and we started to see this, by the way, in 2004 when I was running the Dean campaign, is how the party structures, both party structures, have so weakened that they no longer do control who the nominee is. It is more of a personality cult now, and some of it's the donors can still decide, but that's not true either with small dollar donations. And so what you saw was a diminishing since about 2003, 2004, where the usual guardrails of a party, big donors, the big power players in the party could and this quote establishment could take out an outlier, an outsider, or someone that was not acceptable to the party. That doesn't, Dean we almost overtook that in 2003. By the time 2008 comes along, people forget Hillary Clinton was that person. She had all those donors, all that, all the county chair, all those people. It was Obama's ability early on. Just sheer personality, building that small donor base that had come out of the Dean campaign and using all those tools. He is the first one who actually, and he was acceptable to the establishment too. So I'm not arguing that, but you just see it happening where by the time you get to 2016, it's completely, it can completely overrun an entire party like Trump did. And again, I think you're right, Stuart. A lot of it was because I also saw this in 2004. We were in a murder-suicide pact kind of situation with Dick Gephardt and getting into a big fight. And John Kerry was the one. When you sort of flip it around, he let all the rest of us get into this big fight about because they were all coming after us after Howard Dean. And he just sort of like swooped by everybody without anybody ever laying a glove on him. That's really essentially what happened to Trump, as Cruz and Rubio and us all fought each other.
A attacks B, B attacks A, C benefits. And
that's what so you look into the future, it's hard to see who stops Trump because of the way the structure of parties now and the inability, particularly when they're enabling him and empowering him. He's going to be the nominee
I am more damning of the party. I don't think it's that the establishment failed to stop Trump. The establishment didn't try to stop Trump. And in our system, like a lot of civil democracies, parties have to form a circuit breaker function. And the Republican Party never pulled a circuit breaker. And I compare it to France, where Macron ran, right, against Le Pen. So here's Macron, this 33-year-old punk, creates his own party, gets in the runoff against Le Pen, defeats, I think, 4 other anyway.
Yeah.
All headed by people who had spent their entire lives maneuvering to get in that position. And they were defeated by this young upstart. And they all hated Macron. He was cocky. You can just see.
Yeah.
He comes out of nowhere, and he wins. So what did they do? They backed Macron because Macron was the greater, better for France against Le Pen, even though it wasn't in their own best interest. The best thing for them politically all would have been for Le Pen to win, and Macron to be defeated, and they could emerge in the next election as an alternative to Le Pen. They didn't do that. They put the country first. And it saved France from having a neo-fascist government. That didn't happen in America. Republicans didn't put the country first, and they still aren't putting the country first.
Yeah, well, they're definitely not. See, in the beginning of that, I could see it being kind of there's no way he can win.
Right.
We don't have to worry about him. In a lot of ways, that is what happened to Howard Dean too. One of the reasons we succeeded for so long was no one thought there was any way we could win, so they left us alone. But they never came after him. That's what I'm saying. The whole world came after. The party came after us big time, and knocked us cold out of the race. That did not happen. As Trump started to emerge, should have been seen as a threat at that point. I'm talking about later on as he's starting to roll, and they did nothing.
Yeah.
And then they completely become enablers, and I think are now co-conspirators in this.
They're definitely.
Yeah.
Well, look, there's a question that interests me also that Kathy asked on Facebook. With this attack on voting rights, in this coordinated effort, the likes of which I don't think we've seen since Reconstruction, how is this going to play out? How can Democrats stop this? And are you hopeful they'll be able to?
Well, it kind of points up that question is, I think, points to the whole problem here, because we have to get things done right now. So Biden,
Right,
he has to get some votes like this. Whether he's got the 17 votes on the infrastructure bill or not, he's got to have the room, and I think Democrats have to give them the room and to govern, to try to find common ground on some things to get things done for us and the American people. At the same time, I mean, so you're trying to do that. At the same time, you can't do that on voting rights. It's just, you cannot. They've got to. I think what's happening is you see Manchin putting forward, a revised voting rights act, and I think if they can't get the votes for that, then I think it's put Manchin in the position of, look, I tried to get Republicans to come, they didn't. I'm for I can find my way to an exception on the filibuster to pass voting rights. I think that's the only way it's likely to happen, and it's got to include whatever that final thing that passes has to include a ban on partisan gerrymandering, or I think the odds of winning in 2022 under the current gerrymandering rules and what the Republicans are doing in a lot of these states will make it very, very tough. You can't win. You can't out-organize. People are talking about, well, we'll just have to out-organize our way by all these. You can't out-organize your way out of extreme gerrymandering. It's just there's not enough votes there to get out at that point when they draw lines like that.
So, as my resident Democrat Party expert, Sally online has asked a question of, who do you think the Democrats could nominate in 24 if Biden didn't run, that could bring the party? And do you think Biden will run again?
I think Biden will run again. I definitely do. I think that it would be a big mistake if he decides to go for an element or wing of the party to primary him. Because he didn't do enough. I mean, I was involved in that in 1979, 1980, when the first thing I did as an organizer was work for Ted Kennedy when we challenged Jimmy Carter. There have been other big fights, Ford and Reagan, in your side. You have those against with an incumbent, and it's never turned out well at all. So if he goes, I think it'd be a big mistake to try to stop that if you're from a wing that you don't think he's done enough or something. If he doesn't go, I don't have an answer to that question right now. There will not be some big. That's what I'm saying. That the idea that that somebody has it or will be ordained, like that Joe Biden could just pass it on to Kamala or because it's just not. Yeah, it doesn't work that way anymore. It used to work that way, but that's what I'm saying about the way the internet, the way the fractured media, the decline in power at the top and the emergence of power at the bottom. I mean, that's what's created. That's why Bernie Sanders ran as strong as he did against clearly not part of the party establishment. But that's the change that's happened. And so I would caution anybody out there, to not sort of fall under the delusion that, oh yeah, well, it's for sure going to be X. It may be, but I don't think so. I mean, I think it'll be a fight. But I think, to be honest with you, I don't know. When you think about this, I don't know who would have been better. And I'm not talking as a partisan here when I say this. I don't know who would have been better to be sitting in the White House right now, to be able to somehow pull some of the elements in the Senate and some, and to exude to the country that we really can try to come together. When you have this authoritarian movement dead set again and stopping anything that it can and overrunning anything it can. I think he's done a really amazing job of of doing that, of operating and getting things, of trying to get things done. And I don't know, when I think about all the people who ran on the Democratic side, smart, really talented people, I don't think any one of them would have performed as good as he has for the country right now. And so, yeah, I think there'll be questions about him for sure. But I think right now he'd run again, maybe for the same reason. Mm-hmm. I think he ran because he didn't see anybody else, and he may decide that he has to do it again, even though he might want to step back. He may not think he can.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating how nations have a way of inventing the person they need at that moment to save them. It's so clear in England. You take Churchill, who was this sort of eccentric backbencher, bellicose in 1938, and then he's saving the country. Or Margaret Thatcher, who was somebody that people really didn't like, who was seen as negative, who then becomes the Iron Lady. I think it's absolutely, you can look at Lincoln, you look at how the country can turn to people like that, and who they are changes. Well, look, we could go on for this forever, but these are supposed to be in a half hour. I want to try to end with a bit of optimism, which, I'm not very good at these days. I'm kind of depressing to be around. But when people ask me, what do I think about the future? My answer is I'm negative in the short term and very positive in the long term. And the thing that makes me most positive, to be honest, in the long term is the way America is changing. America has a history of being saved by our immigrants. And if you look at the new census, 1 out of every 10 new American is white. And that is the base of the Republican Party. And it is very difficult to imagine the Republican Party, unless it changes radically, which it has no desire to do, being in its current form a dominant political presence in America, say, in a decade. I think it's our role, our mandate, our obligation to make sure that we pass on a democracy to that new group of Americans. And I think that's very much in question. But that would be my hopeful pitch. So leave us with what you're hopeful about the future, Joe.
Well, no, I'm very hopeful about it. I think it does require us all to come together. And I am going to make a shameless pitch for folks to listen to my That Trippi Show podcast.
Yeah, that's terrific. A terrific podcast. I listen to it regularly. Yeah.
No, and because we do talk about how we build the pro-democracy coalition that we need to build to win this thing. And so, but I'm with you. We have to, it's going to be a tough fight. It's not going to be easy at all.
Right.
But I do have faith we can win it and will win it. And that pro-democracy coalition will pull together in large enough numbers to defeat this authoritarian movement and protect our democracy and pass it on.
Yeah, I think one of the lessons kind of ended here is that, we can't wait till 3 months before an election and try to fight this with some ads that we run. And that was one thing in the Lincoln Project, we realized this. There's sort of, I think, universal agreement that it's our media culture that in many ways has failed this moment. And certainly Fox has poisoned it. And that's why in the Lincoln Project, we're doing things like Lunch with Lincoln, and we're doing Lincoln Project Television.
Right.
You've got to be out there, and your podcast and the Lincoln Project podcast. Lincoln Project Television just ended its second season. We're going to go on a little August hiatus here and come back in September. And it's, millions of people have watched that.
Yeah.
And I think that's, you have to just, you have to win this the way the ant ate the elephant, one bite at a time. And I hope everybody doesn't get discouraged and knows that we can win this.
No, and that's the reason those shows are so important. And I think, again, building the pro-democracy coalition, the podcasts, all of it is, look, everybody out there can do something. You can find one more friend, one more family member, one coworker to get and talk to them about what the threat really, about what this fight really is. It's democracy versus autocracy. Get them to join the pro-democracy coalition. can be Lincoln Project. There are other great groups
Right.
out there, but whether it's Get Out the Vote, whatever your interests are, but you got to become part of it and you got to help build it. And I think that's one of the reasons I joined the Lincoln Project, because I think there's a real opportunity here to use those communication skills, link together what I know and bring from the digital stuff that we've done over the years, and what you guys did such a great job in 2020 in communications and content and moving the message. Put those together, build it even better, and get more people out there to join the pro-democracy coalition. That's going to be really the most important thing in defeating the authoritarian movement in 2022, and definitely stop it from seizing the presidency in 2024.
All right, let's leave it there. Just a big thank you to everybody that joined and everyone that is doing what they can in this moment. I think that this is going to be a period where we're going to look back on and see that America was in danger, and we rose to the moment. So thank you, and come back again and have lunch with us. All the best.
Thanks, everyone.